Welcome to the Total Acre Podcast. I'm your host, C.R. Siebold. This podcast is all about helping growers unlock their potential. We aim to bring listeners agronomic insights, valuable educational interviews, real-world strategies that optimize yield and maximize ROI. This show is going to explore innovative practices, creative strategies, and breakthrough products with people that are shaping the industry, all through engaging and inspiring stories. Who better to learn from than the legendary world champion David Hula, Randy Dowdy, and Alex Harrell? Because in farming and in life, iron always sharpens iron. And the best way to grow or get better is to continually be learning, networking with peers, have access to industry leaders, and the tools, tips, and tricks, and overall quality of information. Knowledge is power. Tune in, hit play. Let's unlock your farm's potential together. Hey, Chad Siebold here with Total Acre Podcast. Excited to have Todd Zehr, our new guest, with us out of Kankakee, Illinois, with SoilBiotics. Thanks for joining me this morning.
You're welcome. Thank you, Chad.
Man, I tell you what, I know you and David have worked together for probably 2-3 decades now with products and services, but this is one of the first times we've really kind of chanced to get under the covers together.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, David's been a great guy to work with and follow, and he always challenges us, and I enjoy that.
Well, and I think that's a testament to some of the things that I guess, in terms of being a partner and working with Brian Maddox to bring products in, it definitely helps to be able to, how do I say it, be okay to be exposed, right? At the end of the day, not every product works every time, but when it doesn't, I think that you're in a unique position with SoilBiotics and the company that you've created to be able to make things better and get better every day. And I think that's a pretty cool thing about SoilBiotics, at least that I've learned over the last few years. So, Todd, tell us a little bit about SoilBiotics. How did you get started? I know you've been around for 30, 40 years now, and you don't look like you've been around that long, but the business has.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have been around that long. When I got out of college, I went out to California, and I was working on a semi-dormant alfalfa project for a seed company back here in the Midwest. So all of the semi-dormant alfalfa was grown in the Corcoran, California area. DeKalb, Pioneer, all the majors were out there, and then a lot of the mid-sized companies as well. So I went out there, and growing up on a dairy farm, you don't get too far away from home, thinking California is just palm trees and movie stars. But California is agriculture. It's not Silicon Valley, but it's agriculture that makes California, the state that it is. And went out there and came back home and moved my family out there. And I was out there for 26 years. So we had a company out there, and we were doing.
You were kind of at home. You were kind of at home, right? Because you've got an ag background. So if you say it's ag country, you sit back and you look at California maybe a little bit differently when you get on this dirt, and you're like, wow, this is kind of like home. Maybe a little bit different crops, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, they had alfalfa out there. That's one thing that we had back here, but we didn't have lettuce, romaine, all your vegetable crops, and then your permanent crops too. So your walnuts, pistachios, almonds, all those crops were out there. And the diversity is what really attracted me to California. And I had a lot to learn when I went out there, but I was very fortunate to get in with some farmers that, I just said, look, I'm from the Midwest, and, here's the crops that we've been working with all of my life. And, I want to learn. So I learned I was out there in their hip pocket every day trying to learn something new. And we developed some technology out there that helped the vegetable industry. What would be our version of precision planting. And we pelletized. We put a 3mm pellet around each one of those little seeds. And then we built a planter with a belt. And then we could drop that seedling in a specific space, because the produce companies, they want a head of lettuce to be a certain size or a melon to be a certain size. So we could control that by our seed spacing. And that really helped the farmers too, because that eliminated an $800 an acre hand thinning project. So, really helped them out a lot. And then we developed the first organic pellet, and then the first organic seed treatment out there. And then everything was going really well. And then in 2006, I came back to Illinois because we had a cow-calf operation back here, and we row crop farmed, and my dad had leukemia, a very acute form of leukemia. So I sold the company to one of our competitors, and then came back here in Illinois and farmed from 2006 to about 2010, and then started SoilBiotics up in 2010. I started making some products in the tool shed, kind of like a,
Sure.
Hewlett Packard story, I guess. They started in a garage, and
Yeah, yeah.
you got to start somewhere, right? And so
That's right.
it took off. People were saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" We're kind of interested, and so we just kept going and going. And then in 2010, that's when we started SoilBiotics up. So we've got distribution across the whole U.S. and then a couple international countries that we do business in. And so it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy what I do. I don't look at it as work. It's just helping people out every day.
Yeah, and I love that story too, because I think and for the farm kids that are listening, maybe you're a little bit younger too, right? Like you never know what you're going to grow up to be, right?
That's
You're
right.
out there in the tractor today, and maybe you're still finishing up planting kind of thing. But if you look at, what'd you say, 27, 28 years you spent in California, come back
26,
and
yeah, 26
yeah,
years, yeah.
yeah, come
And it went
back
by
and take
like a
over the family
flash.
farm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the cool thing there too is that father of innovation is, basically there's an engineer in every farmer, right? And you're trying to solve solution or provide solutions. And ultimately that's what I think most producers appreciate, right? You got boots on the ground, you're trying to provide a solution. And I think that's some of the tech that you bring to the table.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So was there a flagship product in 2010 where you're like, hey, this is the one? Or was it just you were kind of in the back, kind of, mixing jugs and vials?
Yeah. Actually, our Growth Boost, which is our humic product, and Soil Boost, which is our dry humic, those were the two products that we started out with. We needed a liquid product for the foliar applications, and it did a really good job of stabilizing nitrogen. Wanted to get away from the urea inhibitors. I just didn't like what it was doing to the soil and the microbiology and things like that. And then, with compaction issues and, nutrients being tied up in the soil, that's where the dry soil boost came in. And so those were the two products that we started with. And to this day, they're still two of our
I
flagship
was gonna say,
products. I mean,
we've
we have a program approach. We take a soil test, we, take a look at the soil, and then we build a program like that. It's just like building a house, from the ground up.
sure, sure. Well, I gotta ask, right? If
Yeah.
you are a farm kid, you spend 26 years out in California, where did you learn the chemistry, the biology? Was it just by chance, or are you academically trained?
No, academically trained. Yeah. So my
Okay, okay.
bachelor's,
So you
yeah,
have
my bachelor's in agronomy and my master's in organic chemistry. And so
okay, okay. So you have some secret sauce there too behind the scenes.
yeah,
Combine
yeah,
that with a farm kid, and it's a dangerous thing, right?
yeah, yeah, I guess. Yeah. And, just so you don't blow something up, that's the main thing. But,
you know, no
that's
kidding.
another experiment.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
Well, I think, from our relationship in terms of Total Acre and what we've been able to do over the last, it's almost been since inception, since 17, 18 is when you were kind of in play.
Hmm.
I think there's been a few different fun products that we've kind of had a chance to play with, and I know you don't want to highlight products, but at the end of the day, I know you've got some, it's not all about biology. There's humics, so maybe just kind of give me the plethora of different things that you're familiar with and what you work with or what your customers work with within your brand.
Yeah, so we've got a full line of products from seed treatment all the way through to post-harvest on conventional and organic products. So we can grow the entire crop. The only thing that we don't sell is chemistry, herbicides and pesticides and things like that. But yeah, I mean, we get a lot of calls, from guys just saying, "Hey, here's my APH. I've been doing this for the last couple of years, and we're not raising the bar." So I'm like, "Okay, fine." So I take this, real disciplined program approach to it. So we start with a soil test. We take a look at that, and then I'll go over that with the grower and say, "Okay, we got this going on, that going on, and so we're going to put this product on, and this is how we're going to correct some of those issues." And we usually start really small because I don't like to throw the whole kitchen sink at it, for lack of better words, because you got to get that
Sure.
soil fixed first, because that plant's got to pull 60 to 70% of the nutrients out of the soil. So we got to work on that first, because you can spend a lot of money above ground and still not move the needle.
100%. When I
Yeah.
think that is the scary thing, right? So first off, I think all the easy but extra bushels are gone, right? I think everybody's kind of found those with an
Yeah.
NPK type product, right?
Right.
And I think where you're at right now is, yeah, I think that those extra bushels probably come from a healthier, more productive soil system. And I think that some of the things that we've been able to kind of actually work together on is how do we take that systematic approach that you talk about? I know you work really heavily with Brian Maddox, who runs our trials, and
Mhm.
placing products in there. I know that I can't talk about some of the products, but they usually start with an X, right? Which means experimental.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're always testing to get things adjusted or made better. And I think that's another testament to what I've seen within your company that I really like. It's not done ever, right? It's always getting better.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, and when we started with Total Acre, what are the issues that we're having? That's, rather than saying, okay, yeah, this is the best thing since water in a bottle,
Mm-hmm.
we're not that company, there is no silver bullet. And I know a lot of guys are looking for it. And, the silver bullet is to try to get a good disciplined program together from the ground up and then continue to, always try to improve on that. I mean, I told somebody that the other day. I said, that's the silver bullet. I mean, if you really want to call it one, but
Sure.
we really focus, and then we also look at the economics too. I mean, because we farm, we got to look at it from that side of the fence, and then we also look at it from the manufacturing side also. So everything's got to be economically feasible to
Sure.
in order to go forward. So yeah, we're looking, and Bryce gave me some information. We're experimenting with EXP 922 this year. He said, hey, guys are looking for something. They can't get nutrients into the plant and this, that, and the other thing. And I said, okay, let's take a look at this product right here. And so they're looking at that this year. And then last year, we did our first trial with it's called X246, and I told Brian, I said I want this in some heavy tar spot area, very heavy disease prone areas, and he put us there, and we did really well. And we went up against 2 shots of Veltima, and I think we won 5 out of 6 trials.
Ooh, so it's up against a synthetic
Yeah,
fungicide.
yeah, up
Very
against it. And
cool.
so when you back the economics in there, not just the yield, I mean, we picked up yield as well, but when you back the economics in there, it becomes a rather big number. And, I always try to enlighten guys on that, don't just look at bushels, there's more to it than bushels. I mean, because it costs you X amount to get that material into the plant, and then you got this much back, I had some guys
Sure.
last year, they had some pretty good crops, there's a, yeah, I had some 300 bushel corn last year. I said, what did it cost you to get that 300 bushel? I don't know. And they thought about it and called me back a couple of weeks later and like, oh, wow, we really didn't do as well as we thought we did. We had the
Sure.
number,
Sure.
we hit that number, but you got to look at economics, especially, I mean, and not just in down times or good times, but it's an every year you have to look at it that way, I feel.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, for those that maybe are not aware of what Total Acre is about, maximizing ROI, it really does look at that cost per bushel. And I
Mhm.
know that that's hard to believe sometimes when you've got a guy like Hula that's raising 623 bushel corn. Obviously, that's not across all his acres, but trying to get that systematic approach on maybe some poor acres. Obviously, his competition fields are pretty dialed in. But at the end of the day, that's what it's about. We're always going to have a challenge in ag. And guess what? We talked about this beforehand. It's even though we have a product that worked in one place 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, sometimes Mother Nature will throw you a curveball and something will happen. So you look at where you're farming this year, right? I think we talked about everybody's behind,
Mhm.
then you know what, we're replanting, right? So there's always that challenge. So, probably tar spot is going to be something this year, I would assume, with wetter conditions. You're going to have some, like you said, maybe some fungicide issues here later in the season here. But when you look at the challenges this year, specifically where you're kind of in that Illinois market, what are you seeing?
We went out, especially this year, we went out about 2.5 weeks earlier this year just to with our soybeans, just to try to pick up maybe some GDUs, put a few more bushels in the bin. And I mean, the weather was great, soil conditions were perfect, so we pulled the trigger and went, and then we got this cold weather. And I think, especially in
Yeah.
the spring on a seedling, when you get that up and down, cold, warm, it's really not good. Especially on the early side, on the front end of the crop. You get about V4 and a little bit later, you can handle a little bit of that inclement weather, but on the front end, it doesn't. But I will say this year with our no-till and strip-till guys, and we saw some herbicide damage too.
Mm.
And it was all due to heavy residue. So
So Todd, you just talked about damage for guys that are not used to hearing residue damage. Like if you look at some of the things that folks hear about, why would there be residue damage, right? Certainly, we know if there's too much residue, but some of the nutrients that get left behind is probably the major issue.
Quite a bit of business this winter, and I just told guys, I don't get carried away. When I said we're going to split some fields, well, I want to do half my farm. So I said, no, we're going to take your most challenging farm, and that's where we're going to start. That's where we always start. I don't want to be on your best soils, your best farms, because I want to be on that farm that's been that consistent low APH. And so we start there, and it's degrader and soil boost. And this year, where guys had that, it did very well, especially for the no-till and the strip-till guys, where guys had a lot of residue. They're putting down a pre-emergence, and then you got a lot of nitrates in that residue, and then that you don't have that soil to chemistry contact, and there was some issues this year. We saw some, it'd be potassium deficiency on the very tips of the leaves, and it was burnt back. It'll come out, but we just don't want that plant to have a bad day. Right. Well, and you can get nitrates that are going to leach out of that residue, especially if you're corn on corn, and they're not able to get really good seed to soil contact. There might be hairpin and some residue in there. And then the guys that put the degrader on in the fall, they were able to sail right through, had a really nice seed bed, seed strip and bed to plant in, and it did very well. And
what do you attribute that to? What do you attribute? So like degrader so for those that don't know, degrader is a product that is a residue management. It'll break down. It's a degrader. It'll digest, right? I guess some of that residue. So it has the ability to take that up and release it slowly over a period of time versus holding it and then damaging the crop late season or in season, correct?
Well, what it is, so if we put this on in the fall, so there's going to be microbes and bacteria they're going to be feeding all season, all winter long, because there's some that can go through some, very inclement weather. And then there's some that are going to go dormant. So, and it's just a matter of finding that right consortium. Okay. So, and everybody has to stay in their lane and do their job. When you have something that's you got one microbe or one bacteria that wants to dominate the whole consortium, then you're going to have issues. And so, we'll get that feeding all season long, and then guys will come in the spring and they'll say, hey, it looks like, we just don't have the residue that we had before. And they'll go through there with a field cultivator, a VT tool, strip till bar, or just a no-till planter, and they're like, oh, they hit those stalks and everything just turns to dust. So once they get broken down, all of those nutrients go right back into the soil because, and they're very valuable to the plant because plants like plant-based materials. It's not in a plant's DNA to take in all the synthetics that we force it to take. Now we've got some tools in the tool belt that we kind of manipulate the plant to take that in. But when it really comes down to it, they like plant-based materials. And that's one good thing with the degrader. What we found out the first year that we were with Total Acre and we trialed it, we were in very drought-stricken areas. And I remember Brian Maddox said, hey, we got something going on here, and your satellite imagery, I just love it because we can watch that crop all season long and just watch what it does. And at the end of the, like in August, we were picking up 7 bushel here and 10 bushel. We even had one gentleman, one of the Total Acre guys last year, he picked up 18.7, I think. It was amazing.
And what are you attributing that to? So you've got so it's a biological based product.
Yeah.
A degrader.
Yeah.
So are you seeing like an increased colonization? I know what we've seen is higher bricks or increased sugars. So I think there's some feeding ability or you're providing food source. But do you see an increased colonization or what do you see? What are you attributing that product to?
Every microbe and bacteria in there has a job that they have to do to feed or break down that residue. So this microbe and bacteria feeds on it, and then the exudates from that microbe and bacteria will help feed another microbe and bacteria. And so basically all they're doing, Chad, is they're just feeding on that residue. That's all that consortium does. We have another consortium that works with the chemistry and the soils and things like that. Yes, that's RSB 4400. But the degrader, basically, that's all it's designed to do is to just break down nutrients. So now when you got all those plant-based nutrients broken down, go right back into the soil profile, now you got an immediate food source, especially in a drought-stricken year, because the synthetics might get tied up, or you might have or you just may not lose them and the plant's not able to pick them up, but it'll go for that plant-based material first. So that's the reason
making that more plant available essentially, right? Versus locking that up, tying that up was just the key.
Yeah. So
this is why you see these jumps that nobody can believe, right? When they hear 18 bushels, well, these are hidden bushels, right? Like these are bushels
Yeah.
because the plants have the ability to kind of unlock some of these things that are hidden. And when we talk within Total Acre, that is what it's about, right? Is unlocking your potential by finding solutions that can kind of discover, where does it work best? How does it work, right? We have to know how
Hmm.
it works to be able to
That's right.
unlock some
Yeah.
of that potential. And I
Yeah.
think you do a really good job of explaining that. You bring it down to somebody where I can understand it, Todd, which is it's a
Well,
blessing.
it's just, I mean, you got to make sure everybody can get their head around it, and, so even with guys that are heavily manured, this is an excellent product for that because now you're going to get mineralization. I wish we had access to more manure around here. I mean, we'd put it on every acre we got, but we just don't. We just don't have it. And so we work with a lot of your Total Acre guys out there in Western Iowa. Wade DeGroot's just been a great guy to work with. They're really heavily manured out there, and he's like, man, this is a game changer for us. And he says, plus it keeps my dad happy because now when my dad goes in there and no-tills the beans, he's not cussing me out saying, hey, we got all this residue. I'm plugging up the planter. I'm knocking chains off, this,
Well,
that, and the other thing. So that's always good to
well,
hear. I
Todd,
said, got to keep your
I
dad happy.
love 100%, right? Without Papa happy, nobody's happy, right? You could
That's
say anything
right.
else, but
Yeah.
I do see too, like the manure guys talking about the guys that are work with manure. Like it's not about tonnage, right? It's about making that tonnage work for you on those acres. So I believe there are products out in the marketplace, and I know you have a few interesting ones that can take, instead of putting 8, 10, 12 tons just to get rid of it, to get it out. We know that phos, a lot of that nutrients is locked and it will be locked. But I think we can use less manure, get it across more acres and make it more available, the nutrients within the plant with certain products that are in the marketplace. So Todd, I had the pleasure of kind of being out in the field. I know you've done a couple different crop tours with Total Acre and been out and had a chance to be with the group. Yeah, that's the best, right? Getting your boots dirty. It's kind of fun.
That's right.
Especially if
Yeah. That's how
David's
you
next
learn.
to you, harassing you.
Yeah.
If
No,
David's
he's
harassing
great
you,
at
picking on you.
it. Yeah.
You talk about a challenge, right? You can sit there
Uh-huh.
in a field with David and, hey, why does it look like this, Todd? Right? It's
Yeah.
always fun to get put on the spot. But
Yeah.
we were out in the field last year in Central Iowa, and we were talking about humics and fulvics, and David had asked the question is who's using a humic, and almost 75%, maybe 80% raised their hand. There was
Mhm.
another percentage that the question was asked like, well, what is in the product and what's the name of the product, and I'd say less than half even knew the name of the product. Less than half of that, maybe 20%, knew the name of the product and what was in it.
Mhm.
And there's a few people saying, "Hey, I'm getting my stuff from overseas." I'm like, "What is going on here?" Right? There's a not all humics are created equally. So maybe we've already talked about the biological side of your portfolio. Talk a little bit about the humics and some of the things you're doing.
Yeah, so I've been using humics for a long time. I mean, we probably use more humics in a day in California than most people use back here in the Midwest. Because we used them on. We got some really challenging soils out there. We started using them a long time ago. So when I started making humics, I wanted to make something that was going to be user friendly. And what I mean by that is 99% of the humics out there, if you put something that has a pH of 4 or below, you're going to have issues. What it does is they use a potassium hydroxide or a sodium hydroxide extraction process. And what it does is that low pH activates that, and it just turns everything to mud, and you have a mess. It takes about a day to clean out a 24-row planter, and you just want to avoid that. So when I made our growth boost, it's got humic in it, and we got about, give or take, maybe 3% fulvic in there as well. I wanted to make it so we didn't have any issues. So our humic will play really well down to about 0.5. So sulfuric acid has a pH of 1, so it can go even just a little bit below that. So we can put pretty much anything with our growth boost and not have any issues. Then
And that's a humic or a fulvic?
That's a humic, yeah. So
Okay.
then I started using humic with some customers on Roundup, on glyphosate. So Power Max, WeatherMax, and then the generics. And I put our humic in there because our humics usually run about a 22%, so it's pretty high. A lot of the other humics will be anywhere from 6 to 12%. We have to label ours at a 12%. That's just how we have to label it with the state of Illinois, but it's quite a bit higher than that. So we put some growth boost in with some glyphosate, and I had a mess, an absolute mess. I had an oil slick about that thick on top of I had to drain everything out. And I took about 1,100 gallons of 32 to get it cleaned out. And the reason why, so then I took glyphosate in the lab and tore it apart Well, they use beef tallow as a surfactant, believe it or not. And so it just wanted to tear that up. Well, okay, that's kind of cool. It's doing its job. It frees up nutrients, breaks things up, but not in the tank. So that's when we developed GS30, the 30% fulvic. We don't have any problems with that at all, zero. So your humic acid is going to be your larger fraction. Ours comes from a lignite mine, which is a freshwater basin. And the lignite actually comes from a saltwater basin. And the reason why they call it lignite is back in the 30s, Dr. Leonard from South Dakota State University discovered these humate mines, and then so they coined it lignite. And so everything now has to be coined lignite. But you got to be you got to really pay attention. And I went down, put a meeting on for Alex Harrell a year or so ago.
Yep.
Down in Georgia, and he goes, we don't need the sales pitch. We just want to understand this. I said, that's all I do. You're going to get an education. I said, we're not down here to do a sales pitch. They've had numerous guys come through his camp, talking about humics, and the one guy, good guy, I guess, but I guess he was a legitimate used car salesman. I said, well, you're gonna get the quick and dirty. You're gonna get all the facts, and why we use it.
Sure.
So fulvic's a good biostimulant. It does very good if you're trying to get, nutrients in the plant, or if you're trying, putting it in with fungicide. It really, really helps a lot with with glyphosate. So when we put GS30 with glyphosate, we pull the AMS out and pull all the surfactants out, and then run that product alone. And I'm going to use Wade DeGroot because he called last year. They were very wet on the front end of their crop. And he had at R1, R2, he had some 5-foot tall water hemp. So he ran out of the surfactant that he was using. He goes, what can I use? And he called me and I said, just put in 10 ounces of GS30, pull the AMS out and pull the surfactant out. And he goes, that's it? I go, yeah, that's all you need to do. He goes, these things are 5 foot tall. Some of them are 6 foot tall. I said, that's okay. You'll be all right. So he took 48 ounces of Enlist and 48 ounces of glufosinate.
GS.
And 10 ounces of GS30 and smoked them all. Took them all down to the ground. And
so the efficacy through the roof.
Yeah, and picked up 6 bushel right there.
I'll be darned. See, to me, that's everything you just said there in a nutshell, right? When you start talking about education and knowing more about a humic, it's more than just buying something because it's cheaper, right? There's a million different acronyms you can talk about, or not.
Exactly.
There's a million different sayings around cheaper is not better. But when you if you've ever wasted 1,100 gallons of starter fertilizer or 200 gallons of starter fertilizer trying to clean something out, cheaper is not always better. So Todd, you've said a lot. There's a lot of cool things there. When it comes to education, there's no doubt that you do a good job of educating your producers. When you think of all the different things that we talked about today, if you had a producer just thinking of one thing that he should take into this season and remember, what would be the one thing you would want to leave him with?
Probably the GS30, and then I'm going to throw one more in there. We got a product called 0014. We've been using that product out in California for the last 5 years, and we've been using it on the permanent crops. And we've eliminated fungicides, insecticides, and miticides. And then we're building up the Brix levels in the plant. And that, by eliminating insecticide, fungicide, and miticide, that's $800 an acre treatment that you're saving the grower. And our program is way less than that. And that's one of the things that we're doing. X246 is not that product, but we use that out in California, and then we use it here, and then probably the GS30 with Roundup, because Roundup, what the problem with Roundup is, you get that yellow flash, and that's a yield drag right there. It's flushing nutrients out of the plant. So, sure. And 10 ounces isn't going to cost you. You're looking at maybe a couple bucks, so it's very cheap. So if you're trying to get nutrition or a fungicide, working with a fungicide, I'd say the 0014 and the GS30 is something to look like, because we're always chasing potassium, and then it helps with our ATP production, our photosynthetic activity, and then it also helps lengthen the kernels, put test weight on. So
sure, and that's what we're all chasing. Is if not bushels, we need test weight, which is real dollars.
Test weight is yield.
That's right. Todd, it's always fun to talk to you, and I know at the end of the day, folks are going to appreciate the education they just got listening to you. How do they get a hold of you? Go to the website, What's the best way
You
to
can go
get
to the
a hold of you
website
or
and
your
take a look
team?
at some things. Feel free to get a hold of our office, or, just call me personally. My email is todd@soilbiotics.com. I'll throw out my cell phone number. It's 815-419-8304, and just pick up the phone and we'll have a conversation. That's how it really starts out. Email and text is good to a certain extent, but then I'm a firm believer in picking up the phone and just having a conversation with someone.
It's a big deal, Todd. And I think I appreciate you being on today. And I know that at the end of the day, you're a busy man, trains, planes, and automobiles, but access to information, access to knowledge, that's what Total Acre tries to bring to the group, not just inside of, but also with this podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed watching and listening to Todd. And I really appreciate your time today, Todd. Thanks for coming in.
Appreciate the
opportunity. Have a
good week. See ya.
See ya. And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in today to this episode of the Total Acre podcast. Hey, if you enjoyed it, you liked the conversation, be sure to subscribe. You know the drill. Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Go give us a click, give us a like. Until next time, though, keep pushing forward. We hope that you found something unique, something powerful here that might help you unlock your farm's potential. We look forward to seeing you next week. Be safe. Talk more here soon on the next Total Acre podcast.